And just to be fair for me, it was one time. And it's just as embarrassing and horrifying when like you're in college and you go to the wrong class. As a programmer, when you go and you have all your materials and everything, and then you realize like this is not the right class. And they're looking at me and I'm looking at them. And you just kind of like walk out like that. And then I could hear the laughter, but I digress. But that's okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Pencek, and I'm with the Center for Women Students here at Penn State. And I just want to make sure that people actually know about the center because Dr. Peck talked about a lot of the great resources that are here, but I can't tell you the number of times I'll be telling someone, some different resources. They're like, how long have you been here? Like the center. I'm like, oh, 1985. They're like, oh, we had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of help here, but I think, on a campus this size, it's really difficult for people to know what resources are actually out there. And I think with sexual assault being such a huge, huge problem, here at Penn State and everywhere, but there needs to be people who know what the resources are because you never know when someone's going to tell you something. If they're going to talk about a sexual assault, or maybe they're going to frame it as like a bad hookup and stuff like that. So if you could even just listen to what people are telling you and also know what the resources are, that can actually help them. So just briefly, the Center for Women Students, we're in 204 Buki building, and we're basically your on-campus resource for students in crisis. So, we have a lot of students who will come to us who are dealing with the aftermath of a sexual assault. It could be relationship violence, could be stalking, body image, and we have people there who can help them because not everyone is going to follow the same path. So if someone is sexually assaulted, people might assume that they're going to report right away or call police. A lot of people don't tell anyone, but we have advocates there who can actually meet with students one-on-one and really support them with whatever they might want to do. So if they just want to process something and talk through it, there's that help there for them. So despite our name, we actually help all students. So we have men who come there for services as well. So it's just really important just to keep in mind that there is a resource here for people, particularly dealing with sexual assault. So the focus of my talk today really is about misperceptions. And especially when you talk about misperceptions about sexual assault, I could have slide after slide after slide and be here all day clicking, showing all the different misperceptions about sexual assault. And they can be really damaging. If you think about, victim blaming and things like that, if someone is thinking about coming forward and telling someone, they could hear a conversation that someone might be having. And if it's a kind of a negative tone conversation, that might stop someone right there from even seeking any sort of services. And in our office, sexual assault really is the top issue that we see students dealing with, seeking out services through us. So we probably see, I would say maybe like 100 to 125 students every single year who have been victims of sexual assault, and a handful of those people are male victims. But like I said before, a lot of times people might not report, but they want someone to talk to, and they want someone to believe them. But when they hear a lot of these misperceptions, it just keeps them from doing that. So I want to go through just some of the misperceptions and also talk about like why they're misperceptions, why they're not true. And I hope as you hear these, some of these might even seem familiar. Maybe you've heard your friends talking like this, or maybe you've heard about these. But things that you can do from now on are just, if you hear these things, address them. Because really this issue isn't going to change and it's not going to get any better if people are still feeding into misperceptions. So one of the ones that I hear a lot are victims are always women and perpetrators are always men. And definitely the majority of sexual assaults involve a woman being the victim and a man being the perpetrator. But it's important to also really address that men can also be victims. Women can be perpetrators. You can have same gender sexual assaults. And I think in particular for male victims, there's a big stigma there. And a lot of times people and male survivors won't necessarily come forward because they're afraid of being believed, just like a lot of victims of sexual assault. So it's important to keep in mind that sexual assault does not discriminate. It's not just something that happens to a certain population of people. It can impact everyone. I bet if everyone in this room even thinks about it, they probably know someone who's been sexually assaulted. And if you don't think that you know someone, you know someone. I always tell students, you're not going to go through your experience here at Penn State and not know someone who's who's been impacted by sexual assault in some way. Oftentimes I'll also hear if someone is really sexually assaulted, that person will report, right away, or that person will call police. There's a whole list of reasons why someone wouldn't come forward. I would say the top ones probably are that they're afraid of not being believed. They could be fear of their safety. A lot of the sexual assaults that we see also involve acquaintance situations, so that people know each other in some way. Maybe they share common friends. So I think a lot of people are also worried about losing friendships, losing relationships. If they're in certain, peer groups, am I going to be ostracized by this peer group because I'm going to report this, and it's going to look like I'm bringing this person down? So along with fear of being believed, a lot of times people blame themselves, even though there is nothing that you could ever do that would warrant being sexually assaulted. It doesn't matter, if you've been drinking, doesn't matter what you were wearing, doesn't matter what you were doing. It's never your fault, but so many people still blame themselves, and then they're also worried about other people blaming them. So it's not sexual assault if you were partying and leading someone on. You can't lead someone on. And oftentimes when I do programming, I get a lot of questions about the drinking side of it. And, what responsibility do certain people have? And, what if we're both drunk and all of this type of thing? And I always say, if you have to ask yourselves questions about if you have the consent of the other person, then you need to just call it a night. Because it doesn't matter if someone's been drinking. It doesn't matter if they're drunk. It doesn't matter what their, reputation is, or if they're known for, partying. Again, someone never, ever, ever asked to be sexually assaulted. But so many times in situations where alcohol is a factor, there's a whole lot of victim blaming going on. So I think if we really think about that, we can probably recall people saying things about that, or why was someone drinking, or why was someone doing this? And again, when the focus is so much on the victim instead of the perpetrator, or instead of the behavior that's leading to this, that's really damaging. So it's not sexual assault if both people are drunk. That is absolutely not true. And alcohol is not ever an excuse for taking advantage of someone. Or, even in your mind, people will think, oh, it's just drunken sex and stuff like that. But again, if the only way that you feel like, or that someone feels like that they're going to be able to have sex is to get someone drunk, they have a lot of important questions that they need to ask themselves too. Because especially when I do programs for certain people, there's so much attention on, what if someone just, changes their mind, or if we're both drunk, it's okay. But you still have to be responsible. So even if you're drinking and doing all of that, you still need to make sure that you have the consent of the other person. And if it's, if to you it's becoming like a difficult issue, and you don't really want to have to worry about that, then you shouldn't be having sex with the other person, because there's still that responsibility, and that's really important. So rape and sexual assault are always violent and involve strangers, and people are able to say no. That's really not the case. The majority of sexual assaults that we see, again, people know each other. And not every sexual assault is necessarily violent, but there are certain behaviors that you might see. So it might not always be a situation where someone's like grabbing and violently and throwing, but maybe someone's feeding someone drinks, or is taking advantage of a certain situation, especially when people are friends, or they know each other in some way. There are a lot of ways that people can take advantage of other people. So even if you can just reframe how you think about sexual assault and how it's not always the violent kind of attacks, then you'll see that there are a lot more situations where sexual assault is really happening. And this last one is the one that I will say I hear the most in programming is, what about all the false reports? And I think there's this idea out there that there are all of these false reports, and that people are just changing their minds and calling it sexual assault. And the fact of the matter is that there are no more false reports when it comes to sexual assault than any other crime. I would say the latest statistic is probably maybe 2% or so of all reported sexual assaults are false. So there's not this long list of false reports. Do they happen? Sure, they definitely do. But when people talk about sexual assault, and the first thing they think of is, oh, I bet this is a false report, or how do I know this is true? That is just so damaging not just to victims, but also to others who want to talk about sexual assault and who want to educate people about sexual assault. Again, people are so afraid of not being believed. So when they hear people talking about doubting them, or they talk about the idea of false reports, it really hinders any sort of positive steps in eradicating sexual assault. So then the question comes, so you hear all these misperceptions and whatnot. So what can we in this room do? What can we do to kind of carry this forward and really get the facts out there? There we go. Don't make assumptions about victims, someone's behavior, even what sexual violence really is. Just open your eyes, open your mind to just realizing that, again, sexual assault, doesn't discriminate. Maybe it might not be exactly what people thought it was, but just know that it affects everyone. Educate yourself about the issue, whatever way that might be. Find ways to educate others. Just leave here, go have a conversation with your roommate. You don't have to lead a program, but just talk about it with someone. And then maybe that person will then talk about it with someone else. Don't joke about rape and sexual assault or make a lot of judgmental statements. So like when you get alerts that there's been a sexual assault, a lot of times people might think, well, why was someone walking this late at night, or why was someone doing this? Try to hold yourself back from doing that, or even if you catch yourself, or if you catch yourself doing that, ask yourself why. If you hear other people doing it, ask them why they think that's really relevant. Because you never know the experiences of other people. So if everyone looks around this room, there are definitely survivors in this room, but you're not going to know just by looking at someone if they're a survivor of sexual assault. So then if you hear people making jokes and things like that, it's really important just to address that with them. If you're at programs and you hear people laughing, turn around and ask, what's so funny about this? Because it's really not a funny issue, and it's definitely a very serious issue. And I think if you can even just do these small little steps, it really can have the biggest impact. So the biggest thing that I just want everyone just to kind of take away is that you don't have to do these huge, heroic kind of gestures. It could be everything from conversations to posting something positive on social media. It's these small little things that really can have the biggest impact. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.